Hi, people. So it's about a year now until the 60th American presidential election, and it looks highly likely that it's going to be a rematch of Trump versus Biden. God help America. I mean, I think American politics really is in the sewer right now. I think there's extremes on both sides, but I think it's in a bad way, and I think that's bad for the West in general. Now, if I were an American voter, I probably go for Biden. Doesn't mean I'm overly enthusiastic about him or his presidency. I think there's elements of the woke left that he has unquestionably pandered to, and I think his actual record as president is mediocre at best, and also his age shows a lot of the time. So I do not think Biden's a great president. But when I consider the alternative, which is Donald Trump getting back into the White House, I just can't fathom that. I can't fathom that someone as utterly, utterly corrupt, a demagogue, a man with an utter contempt for democracy, a man whose entire public life seems to be fueled by narcissism and um, self-interest, to me is just it's unfathomable. And in terms of the world situation, I think that if Trump gets back in, you could be sure that Putin appeasement will be on the cards. I just think it's unfathomable. Um, but with that being said, what's going on now, of course, is this civil fraud trial in Manhattan. Now, I haven't followed it deliberately because it's going to be one of the biggest trials of the century, probably. So it's going to rumble on and rumble on. I think it's in everyone's interest to have these proceedings cleared up before the election because if it gets near the election, that's going to strengthen the claims that it's a political witch hunt. I don't think it is. I think that's complete nonsense that's being pushed by the Trump side. It's a principle that no one is above the law. But these cases are complex. Let me just say from the outset, obviously, I'm not a fan of Trump, but I'm not someone who sort of looked at this man with, he's just terrible and I'm never going to be objective. I give him credit for some things he done in his presidency. I think he's an awful president, one of the worst ever, but he done a few good things. For example, the diplomatic breakthroughs between Saudi Arabia and Israel, give him credit there. There isn't really much else. There's a few other things maybe you could point to, but I think Trump was an awful president. Um, but that's by and by. That's my honest opinion. And it's an opinion that many people have. I honestly would put Trump just slightly above the likes of James Buchanan, Andrew Johnson. I really think he's one of the worst presidents ever. And in fact, his presidency is unique in having what happened on January the 6th. Now, I know his cultists say that's hugely overblown, and it's been weaponized and all the rest of it. But the fact of the matter is, Trump stoked up that mob. There's no question about it. No one can look at those events rationally and claim otherwise. This is a man with a contempt for democracy, and whatever happens in this trial, whatever people think of this trial, there's a basic truth which is in the 2020 election. Trump called the Georgia Attorney General, I believe his position was, Mr. Uh, Rapperberger, if I've got that name right, but regardless, senior Georgia official, spoke to him for an hour and basically tried to influence the polls. Now, that's something you would expect in a banana republic. This is the United States of America. Trump is rotten. I really believe that. But that's my gut feeling. Now, there's been theatrics in this trial today. Apparently, and I'm going to read the transcript as reported by ITV. There were, real fireworks between the judge and Trump, and also the judge and Trump's attorney, Alina Habba. I believe her name is. Judge Arthur N. Gore, and this is a transcript. I beseech you to control him. If you can't, I will. In addition to the answers being non-responsive, they're repetitive. We don't have time to waste. We have one day with this witness. This is about Trump. You can attack me. You can do whatever you want, but answer the question. Well, the lawyer, Haba, she then went outside and basically had a rant about the judge. In my opinion, she just, she sounds like a narcissist. She just played the victimhood card. She claimed the judge was deranged. She claimed that he banged the table. Now, the problem is this trial's not televised. It's one thing I think it probably should be, because as long as it's not televised, it will just fuel conspiracy theories, and it will fuel the Trump cult. They'll say it's a witch hunt, and they'll say, "Oh, what are they hiding?" Well, yeah, I think it should probably be televised to, shut them up in that regard, but it won't shut them up. They'll still claim that Trump is a victim. This is a man who could literally, I remember when he said he could shoot someone in Times Square, not verbatim, but he said he could do that and get away with it. Um, I mean, this is a cult. It's the only way to describe it. No matter what Donald Trump says or does, his supporters will blindly support him. And that's a fundamental difference with Biden. Biden has support, but it isn't that sort of um, unhealthy cult like support, which is why, in that sense, Biden's a normal president. He's a normal politician. There is not a cult around him in the same way. But I just think that for Trump's lawyer to come out, well, what she done was she attacked the judge. She also attacked the prosecution lawyer, Letitia James. This is a civil fraud trial, so it's not a criminal trial. But instead of just talking about the facts, she attacked the fact that Miss James, I don't know if it's Miss or Mrs., but regardless, Letitia James ran for election and she didn't win. So what does Haba do? She just attacks that. She's almost talking like Trump himself. She said that today James spoke about numbers don't lie. Well, her poll numbers did, and she had to step down. So in other words, it's an ad hominem attack. It's not about the facts. It's just an ad hominem attack. And I have to say, I'm not a body language expert, but when I look at the shots of Trump coming out with his little sound bites, and I look at her behind him, she looks very uncomfortable. She looks like, to me, she comes across as someone who knows that she is defending a thoroughly corrupt individual. She knows it, but it's her payday, and I just think it's very rich of her to attack Letitia James, saying she's trying to make her name when she's Donald Trump's lawyer. Now, due process is extremely important in any justice system. Trump has a right to a lawyer, right? And she's doing that. But this is not a court appointed lawyer. This is a woman who wants to be Trump's lawyer. And one point in that speech, I think it was quite striking. She was talking about when he becomes president in 2024. That just proves what the judge was saying. That Trump is turning this into an election rally. Trump claims that it's election interference. Well, I know the American election system, lasts a long time, but the formal election itself is November next year. The primaries haven't even begun yet. Now, I know this is the point when you start getting presidential exploratory committees, you get polling being done, and all of that. But the fact that Haba comes out and says, she's pitching how Trump will be president in 2024, that just proves that the Trump side is treating this like an election campaign. Now, the prosecution has to be careful because I thoroughly agree that no one should be above the law. But they do have to be careful that they don't kind of fuel these conspiracy theories that it's a witch hunt. Because I think it should be televised. If that's a mistake not to televise it, maybe that's not the routine procedure for this sort of case. But because of how exceptional this situation is, Trump's not a normal defendant. Maybe there should be an exception and have it televised, so people could see the full discourse of what's happening. But to me, the judge saying, I beseech you to control your client, that doesn't sound like an unhinged person to me. But you just have to look at the comment threads. Things like "We the American people," that is Trump supporters thinking they speak for everyone, saying things like, it's a witch hunt, you know, the judge is out to get him, and all this sort of thing. This is another level of. I really think it's just a very, very unhinged conspiracy theory. I mean, what you'd have to basically propose is that all of these lawyers, all of these judges that are involved in legal cases against Trump, they're all in the pay of the Democratic Party. That the judge is like a stooge of the Democrats. That would be what it basically implies. I just don't buy that. Now, I could be dead wrong. Maybe this is a witch hunt. Maybe they're just out to stop Trump. But the history of this man, the track record of this man is one of a compulsive liar, a narcissist, a demagogue. I don't know how anyone could rationally defend this man. The fact that he called a senior Georgia election official, I think actually it was the Georgia Attorney General. Now, don't quote me on that, I don't remember off the top of my head, but regardless, a senior Georgia official to try and pressure him to change the results. That's something dictators do. That's something tin pot tyrants do. This is a former president of the United States. Even Richard Nixon didn't do that. I mean, honestly, I really think the corruption that Trump is associated with, I'm not going to say guilty of, but associated with, it really makes Richard Nixon look moderate. That's no exaggeration. I think this man is absolutely rotten. Um, but about the polling, apparently that's unfortunate. Apparently, what's happening at the moment, Trump is leading Biden in several polls, including in several swing states. Just looking at ITV again: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. Pennsylvania, of course, that would be humiliating for Biden because it's his home state. He often talks about Scranton. Wisconsin is one of the exceptions. Biden is still leading there. I think the Democrats have to really consider a strategy here. Firstly, they have to distance themselves from the far left. They have to show, for example, that they're the party of law and order now. They're going to struggle to do that when you have senior Democrats like Nancy Pelosi, who during the George Floyd riots basically fueled the fire. So, I'm not partisan when it comes to Democrats and Republicans. I think the Democrats are also largely responsible for the divisions in America. I think the Republicans for the fact that they have a cult leader, but the Democrats for the fact that they have a lot of incompetent leaders. And frankly, Biden, unfortunately, he's an 80-year-old president who looks 80 and sounds 80 sometimes. He stumbles his words. Sometimes it's like, he's quite energetic and he's quite there, but frankly, his age shows. Trump's only a few years younger. But we have this situation. We have two men who are the oldest combined candidates who will ever be by far. I think both parties should have younger nominees, but it isn't going to happen. There is a Democrat, Dean Phillips, from Minnesota, but he's very unknown, and the chances of him becoming the next president are almost zero. And other Democrats are basically telling him to step down. But now we're getting a situation where I've heard David Axelrod, the former Obama campaign manager, is now voicing concerns about Biden, and I believe um, I do think that there's a potential that Biden is a liability because his age is showing. You know, he's done his time. He got what he wanted. He got to be president. I think it's the fact he's running for free election. It's a bit if he's not up to it in terms of health, that's quite selfish of Biden. I think, frankly, he should step aside and let a younger man or woman have a run. I think it's time for a younger generation. Biden's had his 4 years in office. Um, I don't think it will go down as a great presidency. You struggle to see many outstanding achievements. But one thing that he can say is he's not Donald Trump. He's not a demagogue. He doesn't on the day of the invasion of Ukraine, he didn't call it a genius move by Putin. And I know a lot of Americans would disagree with this, but I give Biden a lot of credit for his robust support for Ukraine. I would say that's one of the stronger aspects of his presidency. It's been unwavering. I think that's a very important thing. Others would say his support for the Iran deal weakens the position Israel was in. But now is not a time to assess the Biden presidency. That will be for November next year. But I'm British. I'm an outsider, but I do think there's implications here. If Trump is charged, I hope that not charged. Excuse me. If he's found guilty in these trials, I hope that any Republicans who have any integrity left will do the right thing and abandon him. There's a few, Chris Christie, a few others who are doing the right thing, but frankly, a lot of these Republican candidates are just trying to be mini Trumps. DeSantis is a glaring example. So that's on the Republican side. If incidentally Trump is cleared, then of course he'll run for president again. He'll probably be the nominee. If he doesn't win, there'll be, it'll be a toxic election. I think there'll probably be violence. If he does win, um, what will that say about the United States of America? I honestly think if Trump becomes president again, it will say something about where America is. That this narcissist liar, this vile demagogue, how he could become the leader of the free world. I just think that would be unfathomable. Unfathomable. I don't think he will, and I wouldn't weigh too much in the current polling. A whole year, yeah, a year is a long time in politics, but it shows where American politics is. Even the chance that Trump will probably be a major party candidate. That's just. I mean, imagine Richard Nixon running after Watergate. At that time, it would have been unthinkable. So America is in a worse position now, I would argue, in terms of civil society than it was in the mid '70s. What does that tell you? I That's my honest opinions. I am not a fan of Trump, and I think this cult around him is deeply, deeply disturbing. I will say one thing though, which I think is a big mistake. I do think the trial should be televised because I was trying to find directly the footage of this exchange between the judge and Trump's lawyer and Trump. It would have been helpful. There was just still shots. Um, but if the transcript is correct, he said, "I beseech you to control your client." That sounds totally reasonable. I do not understand how she can stand outside a courtroom and basically lambast the judge without being in contempt of court. That would be unthinkable in almost any other jurisdiction, where a judge can just basically whine and complain and lambast the judge in that way. Apparently, they're going to go for a mistrial. So it's a circus. It's just a circus. Um, but like I say, the Democrats have to be very careful. They can say no one's above the law, but they do have to be careful that they don't give fuel to um, this notion of victimhood. Um, but like I say, if you buy into that conspiracy theory that it's all some big witch hunt, then you'd have to sort of assume that the judge is part of it, that he's sort of a stooge of the Democratic Party. There's no evidence for that. It's, I don't know. I imagine this thing's going to rumble on and on. But the fact that Haba says, she's, promoting him as the next president, the fact that Trump himself says it's election interference, it just shows they're treating this like an election campaign, which shows a complete and utter contempt for the law, the complete and utter contempt for responsibility and accountability and narcissism, the sheer narcissism of Donald Trump. And some of that's coming through in his lawyer. She comes across as pretty egotistical herself, in my opinion. Anyway, that's my thoughts. That's it's just surreal seeing this stuff.